I think it's still paused. You don't want to do that or they won't be able to hear us. Yeah, change that back. Yep. No, you just get rid of YouTube completely. So you minimize that, do that or they won't be able to hear us. Yeah, change that back. Nope. Yep.
Go up to the very
Yep.
top. And
No, you
minimize
just get rid of
this for you.
YouTube
Yep.
completely. So you minimize that, do that or they won't be able to hear us. Yeah, change that back. Nope. Yep.
Go up to the very
Yep.
top. And
No, you just get rid of YouTube completely. So you
minimize
minimize
that,
that, do that or they won't be able to hear us. Yeah, change that back. Nope. Yep.
Go up to the very
Yep.
top. And
No, just get rid of YouTube completely.
I think she's using.
So you minimize that, do that or they won't be able to hear us. Yeah, change that back. Nope. Yep.
go up to the very
Yep.
top. And
No, just get rid of YouTube completely.
I think she's using.
So you minimize.
now you can open them. Yep, your little one. Where the pretty people are.
The pretty people.
The pretty people.
Hold
Yep,
on.
right there you go. Yep. Yep, go ahead. Yeah, yeah. All right. Then mine's down. Right. And recording is paused. All right, supervisor, we're ready for you.
All right. Well, I want to welcome everyone to the April 3rd, 2023 Town Board Workshop. We have a pretty busy agenda, but before we start on that, I'd like to apologize for not being there. I woke up this morning with a curse again, and I don't want to spread it around. And I'd like to get rid of it as soon as possible, so bear with me. In the meantime, Amber will pretty much run the table of content or the agenda contents because Amber put the agenda contents together. So hopefully my coughing won't disturb you and we can move on. I'd like to have you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's a slight delay.
The first agenda item is discussion topics.
Before that, I apologize if we could have Deputy Town Clerk call the roll.
Yes, but before we do that, I would like to make sure that people understand that you are going to start running the meeting after we find out who's with us.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Will the town clerk call the roll, please?
Councilman Chase.
Here.
Councilwoman Corbin.
Here.
Councilwoman Morelli.
Here,
Councilman Bolivar.
Here.
Supervisor Cusie.
Here. Aye.
Thank you, Jerry. And welcome, everyone. We do have a very busy agenda tonight, our discussion topics. And the first one is a Horses Friend 3-year plan submission for credit from December 2022. So we're going to invite up our recreation supervisor, Pat Stevens, who is the overseer of the Rush Riverside Refuge for the town. And we're going to invite Karen Caton up to, if you want to pull 2 chairs up, ladies. She is the accountant for a Horses Friend and put this document together. And there's a nice microphone, so everyone will be able to hear you just fine.
Terrific.
We sent this out to Pat and I worked with Karen on this to the board last week. It took us almost 2 weeks to put it together. We tried to put it together to us, what we felt was understandable, but again, we've lived with it, you haven't. Everyone on the board, so we are here to listen, ask questions, get your questions answered. And see where we move forward on the plan. So Karen, do you want to go through it real quickly for us?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the board for this opportunity to give you this overview. We've been very busy out at the farm and we're very excited, very happy to be there and looking forward to moving forward as we've got some other improvements that we would like to make. So this is an overview of the major improvements. The format we chose was to start with what was included in the original lease agreement. And just to show you what has been done so far, what we have planned for the near term, that we are in the process of getting estimates for, and just make sure that you're comfortable with how the work is being done so that you see it against the rent that would be due and just having that big picture. So starting at the top, in September, we initiated the work for the well. The well was done in 2 phases. We had to dig the well and then install the pump. The original cost for the lease was $16,000. And the 2 phases ended up being these 2 amounts that you see here. So the work was done throughout September. And the original proposal for the well was approved by the town. It was approved in September. We had the second phase of the pump that was completed in December. That's when we submitted the actual receipts. So that's just why you see that those were the dates where it's approved, and then we submitted the actuals. So that's done. The pump is working well. The well's working well. And we're very happy to have water for the horses. The next phase or the items that were in the lease was fencing. And for the original lease, we had an estimate of 10,000. And at the time that we were developing these estimates for the lease, we hadn't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on the property to truly take a look at the fences and to understand what pastures were there. So the first phase that we did was to reinforce the existing pastures. That work was done in September. The amount that we had spent on fencing to date through September for our quarterly submission was the $5,600. And that was approved and submitted, and that was approved by the town in September. Then we moved to do some new pastures north of the outdoor arena. And again, we're just moving along with putting those pastures in. The fencing for that area and the work that we were doing was the next phase of submission, so that was $2,900. And that was submitted in our December submission. So from what I understand, so far that hasn't been approved by the town, and that's just what's pending. So those credits would be pending for approval now this year, fiscal 2023.
But the expenses have been incurred and the work was done, correct? Just to clarify.
Yes, for those pastures.
Okay.
Yep, yep. So where we're at now is that we're looking to, we've got 2 pieces together. We're gonna talk about the tensile fencing and then the run-in shed roof repairs. But to keep all the fencing together, what we're looking at is we do have a gentleman who is working to give us an estimate for tensile fencing. This pasture is associated, it's out in front of the run-in shed, the large run-in shed that's part of the lease. So that's the fencing that we're looking to put into place. The reason why we're looking for the tensile fencing is because with the large run-in that we have, it's a very wonderful run-in, we would be able to put our draft horses out there. So in order to be able to have fencing that's strong enough for the draft horses, that's the approach that we're looking at for that fencing. The timing of that, we're looking to do that in the fall of this year. So that's why we're just putting that plan together so that you have that understanding of what we would like to do there. Working down to the heating, when we were negotiating the lease, we didn't know or understand what would be available to us with the buildings. When we got there, our understanding was that the heating systems were not comparable because we would need to use propane to be able to heat the building there. Our understanding was that we wouldn't have access to gas. So that was what this heating proposal was to convert one of the heating units in the back of the room or back of the building. And to also then just convert the heater that's in the front of the building. So
It's
that,
in building 5, which is the greenhouse building. Okay,
yeah, so there's two heating units there. So we had a contractor who was taking a look at the work, helping us just to kind of understand, could we use propane? Is that something that we can do? Pull together an estimate for us. We submitted that proposal to the town. It was approved by the town for the work. And at this point in time, there is still the potential for us to do that work. We're just, we got through the winter. And we're looking to understand whether or not we will need to finish off with the heating. So that's out there as work that may be done in 2023. At this point in time, as we're looking at it, because it does look as though yeah, so we're still looking at having the work to be done now. So the next item is really the large project that we have pending at this time. As part of the original lease, we did have access to the large run-in shed. We knew at the time that it needed some roof repairs. When we were developing the lease and we were working with the town to create the lease, we thought that we'd have the opportunity to do that repair on our own. We thought, well, maybe we'll put some sheeting up there, we'll put some roofing materials up there, we'll do what we need to do just to kind of fix the holes. And we estimated $2,500 for that. As we worked through the lease, we learned that we would need to have a contractor do the work that would have insurance. As we're going out to contractors and we're getting those estimates, we've got several estimates. The lowest estimate that we have coming in is for $8,000. So that's just what we're looking at right now is our current estimate for repair of the shed. And to do that work along with the tensile fencing in the fall.
So the other number that's there, the 14,750, what is that?
14,750.
Above the estimate of
Yeah.
8,000.
it was just a proposal because you wanted more than one. So we actually got 3.
Correct. I just
Right.
didn't know what that meant there.
That was just another
So
proposal.
these are proposals. We've gone to 3 different contractors. And we had a contractor do an estimate that we submitted to the town in December. We had another contractor that estimated the 14,750. And then this last estimate is coming in from Todd Fritz at $8,000.
So
Oh,
the
okay.
8,900 in fiscal year 2022 was that first one we got from another local contractor in town. So
Okay,
we got that one.
I can
and-
pick it
and-
up, Jill.
and- No, that's all right. We don't want.
Okay,
Just one.
And if you remember, the board said, that's a lot, let's go get other estimates. So they did get the 2, so there are 3 for 8,900, 1475 and 8,000.
thank you.
Doing it later in this year, how long are these estimates good for? Because prices change kind of quickly.
That's a good point. I can go take a look at what we have from Todd Fritz to see if there was a,
Yeah, it's just
valid
because
period.
I know the change.
There probably was, Karen, more
Yeah,
than
yeah.
likely.
I had
They
a
have
question
been-
on that on the heating unit. Why couldn't you use natural gas there? Wasn't there natural gas already established on that property? I'm pretty sure the one barn did have a heater in it that the fire department runs that was run off of natural gas.
And I think, as we were negotiating the lease, it was unclear to us whether we would have access to natural gas or not. I think it was our understanding that those lines along with the water had all been shut off.
That's what we were told.
Hmm.
Mhm.
The
I know
gas, the
that-
water and the sewer.
I know the one building used to, well, both of those buildings, the greenhouse building and the other building that the fire department runs,
Yeah.
both. Because at one time when we were at that property, we told the town that the one heater was running constantly. And I don't think anybody knew it at the time.
Yeah.
So there was live natural gas there.
I'll have to look into that then.
Mhm.
We
Wow.
didn't know that.
Mhm,
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So if we do find that we have the availability of natural gas to be able to utilize the heaters that are in that building, then the proposal that we had before, when we kind of approved that, we could reverse that out and then have that money available to spend also. But thank you, yes, well,
Yeah, it's worth looking into.
Yeah.
Because I know that they
So
did,
who's
have-
getting the bill?
the town was getting the bill at that time, but I don't know if any of the heaters have run since that point, but
Well,
that
look
was
into it.
4 years ago, probably.
Wow,
So,
okay.
all right, so again, just kind of following for the original lease. We had thought perhaps that there might be a need to put up some security cameras. What we are finding is that traffic at the park is very reasonable. Haven't experienced any vandalism or vandalization. So if we're picking and choosing what we would like to do, certainly the run-in and the fencing is more important for us. And at this point in time, we would say that we don't really have plans to go ahead and do the security camera. The last item that was in the original lease was the pole barn. And at this point in time, when we were negotiating the lease, we really had, we needed more time to be able to understand what level of a pole barn we would need, because the original horse barn, barn number 7, came out of the lease. We just had put this in as an alternative to be able to have something to either house the horses or to have an indoor ring.
And we moved from the horse barn to the indoor riding arena because of the problem with the horse barn,
Mhm.
and that could not be used.
Yeah, so we didn't have stalls available for the horses as we were coming into the winter. So that's why we built the temporary stalls ourselves in both of those buildings.
So questions of the board of the plan, can you follow it? Do you want to go down and look at the notes at the bottom? But is there any questions about
Just
the
about
upper part?
the work to be done. No,
Everything here that's in the white column was all on the original lease agreement with the town board. So that's how it begins, and then
All right, so if you want to
So
go down to
the-
the bottom part, Karen.
yeah, so the summary at the bottom is just taking a look at the fiscal years for the town. And it's an illustration of, in that year, how much rent did we pay or do we anticipate paying, either in cash? What are we going to be getting as credits from the town for the investments that we've made? In 2022, you see that we did pay some cash. We've got the 19,000, so 22. We started the lease. We only had 4 months during calendar year 2022, so we had rent due of 6,000. So that would be a credit that we would carry over into the next year. See that rolling up to the top? So 2023 is our year of yellow.
So the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, in my mind, I look at what costs were actually paid. Okay, and so we have the fencing and the well pump, but we didn't pay, or you didn't pay for the heating.
And we had that discussion. We've had some preliminary meetings, and as we were meeting with Jerry, we also met with Janice. Because the town has approved that work, the town has actually approved the credit for the rent. And that's our understanding, that because that's been approved, If we don't spend it, then we would reverse that out, and that would come out of the analysis, yes.
Right, but we're in 2023 now. And again, and Robert, if I'm misunderstanding how the lease is supposed to work, I apologize. But in my head, if we're operating on cash basis, I like to think cash basis.
So one way you can think about it is, although it was granted in 2022. So if we look to 2023, right now, we're anticipating credits of the 18,415. That's the pole barn, the run-in, the fence, and then this remaining fencing that's coming through. Let's say that the town reverses that approval of the heating system. Then the credits in 2013 would be reduced by that amount.
Correct.
That's where I would think.
Yeah, and that's, again, correct me if my thinking is incorrect, but I would say, since you didn't actually pay that yet. Now, when we look at the lease, let me just back up. In my mind, okay, so certain things were negotiated, in exchange for your using the property, that you were going to make these improvements and your cash outlay would go towards the rent.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, which is great. So to me, that 2130 should come out of 2022 and not go towards a credit in that year. Yes, it's something or that something to that effect, and there may be some cost, even if we find that there's a gas line, a viable gas line, you still have to hook up and do things to connect it, I'm guessing. So there'll still be, no matter what, I'm guessing some cost in connection with having heat available. So the 2100 should come out of fiscal year 2022. So it would reduce the credit. Now, I'm not saying that these are things that the town negotiated to allow under the lease, whether it's in 22 or 23 or 24 during the term of the lease. Like, we're okay with those kinds of improvements being made and those kinds of costs. We know things change and we're not, I think that's willing, like they go a little more, a little less, whatever. But I think the credit comes when you spend the money or make the improvement to the property,
Yeah, and I. think
because that's the deal.
That was the original,
But that's what
yeah.
the finance director. Go ahead.
Lease out?
Yeah.
No,
No.
that's right. This was about how the
Yeah, so-
finance director said that it should be followed,
But it wasn't incurred.
but the town approved it at that. I like, we
We
can get back to you.
approving something's like, yeah, we think you should make that improvement. That's good. That's an okay thing to do.
And
we
I think Karen's
negotiated that
saying
in the
that
lease.
We can look at it, we were just going by with what our finance person told us to do. But if we
Because
want to look at it a different way, then we'll look at it a
Okay.
different way.
I'm just like, to me, it makes more sense. As the money is spent, it goes against the rent. Okay, and then, we agreed to certain things being done.
Yep.
Beyond that would have to be
Yep.
further negotiated, obviously, but, so to me, I would like to see that moved into whenever you actually incur it, and do it, make the improvement to offset the rent.
So we'll take that back to Janice,
Mhm.
and along those lines, because we had some of these discussions, when is it really considered a credit or not? She indicated because it had been approved by the town, her understanding was that it was a credit. If we just need to have a resolution from the town that we're not approving it at this time until we actually incur it for the credit, then we can go ahead and just adjust the analysis.
I mean, I guess in fund accounting, it's the unexpended balance and blah, 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 but
You two know more than the rest of us, though.
She had those types of reasons in terms of.
Okay.
Approved, it was
and
allocated,
whatever
it
the
was-
town is comfortable with, and I don't know what my fellow board members think about thinking about it in those terms.
That seems to make sense.
Mhm.
Not until it's actually occurred.
So,
Yep.
and then just
Mhm.
shifting it forward, and so when you fix the heat, that's when we get the credit, when you spend the money to do that.
Yeah.
So essentially, you're just gonna bump that into the yellow. for now.
the next, this current year. Assuming,
Mhm.
I'm assuming you're gonna fix the heat one way or the other this year.
That would be the plan this year versus
Yeah.
out into the future.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, so we can certainly take that as an action
Mhm.
item to revisit that with
Yep.
Dennis as we had previously.
Okay,
Sure.
continue.
Yeah, yeah. So looking at the forecast down below, this just reflects this current analysis in terms of credits that would be issued during the year and carried over from the prior year. For total credits in 2023 of the 34,000 against the rent due for the year,
Mhm.
18,000. So that just shows the credit carried forward into 2024. At this point in time, we don't have any further work planned. So this is when we start drawing down on the credit.
Right,
We would have to actually pay in cash in 2024, about $1,700.
I mean, you're paying cash one way or the other, whether you're paying it to the town or you're paying for the improvements.
Exactly.
And we're saying it's great,
Whether we're
take care of it, do it.
paying- let me
You
put
know,
it
from
this
your
way.
point of view, the money's going.
Exactly, whether we cut a check to
Yes,
you,
cut-
or whether
that's
we
it.
cut a check to the contractor.
Yes,
Yes, yes. And then, yes, just showing then for the total, what we would be paying in cash to the town versus improvements to the contractors.
And when you get to 2025, because they've done all the improvements, that's when they would start paying monthly rent
hmm
without.
So approximately what, a year and 6 months,
Mhm.
like 7 months, we would be at that point where.
But we know how bad this property was when we had it before.
Oh, I
how
think
much
the
work needed to
idea
be
of,
done.
you make the improvements instead of paying the rent, the town still winds up with a better property
Yes.
in the
yes.
end.
Yeah.
So instead of us hiring somebody, you're using it, you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's, everybody wins.
Terrific. And certainly as we sit here, we're very happy there. These improvements, our current lease is for a certain term, taking us through the end of 2025. Our intent is that we're making these improvements for, a very long time,
Right.
for the benefit of the town. And we hope that you're pleased with what we're doing there and that also, we're kind of planning for the future also.
All right, are there any questions on the major improvements before we flip to the minor improvements? Dan?
Nope.
Barry, anything at home?
Everything's cool.
Okay, all right.
So the next sheet, I think, we asked. Not that the board asked for, but we felt it was important that a horse's friend put together so that you see what they are not asking for credit for, that this is coming out of their own expenses as to additional things that they have over there. So I'll turn it back over to Karen. Yeah.
Sure. So again, working off of the original plan from the lease. We anticipated that once we learned that we weren't going to have building 7, the barn, available to us, that we were going to have some sort of stalls available for the horses with the winter coming. I'm sorry, let me step back. This is a run-in shed. This run-in shed, for the original lease, this was a shed that was planned to be put up behind the 2 very large barns that are out there. We thought that if we had to keep any of the horses outside, that we might need to put a temporary shed up. And that was the location that we had just chosen at that time. Versus spending $5,000 on a temporary shed, what we chose to do, if we step down to the next one, also where we thought we would have to install temporary stalls into building 8. We estimated that we would have to put 18 stalls in. We estimated $1,500 per stall. That would be about $27,000. Certainly after paying for the well, we didn't have that kind of money to go out and buy temporary stalls. We were looking at stalls that were cheaper. What we found and what worked really well for us was to just build the stalls ourselves, temporary stalls into both of those buildings. And that was for a cost of $4,300. So we really saved a lot of money by being able to build those stalls in those two buildings. So then just continuing on with other, certainly, any repairs to the indoor riding ring, buildings 5 and 8. Certainly there's, painting that's gonna have to be done. There's some damaged wood. We kind of, fixed the walls so that, animals can't get in there. So the plan was to spend $2,500. And as far as the major work on the indoor riding ring, we haven't, had to replace any of the siding yet, or we haven't painted it. But we do expect to be painting it this fall. So as far as any repair and maintaining the existing fencing, certainly ongoing once we get all of these pastures up. Sometimes we just need to do those additional repairs. We're looking at about $1,000. Because we're still in our plan for getting the initial fencing up. We just haven't spent any of that going forward yet. And then also for the property itself, we expected to be purchasing postage. We have electric fencing there, so we've got signs that are up there to warn the public about the electric fencing. So if any of those that we have to continue purchasing those throughout the remainder of the lease. Because we don't have access to a lavatory, we do have the porta potty that we have there for our use, and that just shows the estimate or the cost of what that's going to cost for us for the
Actually spent.
so the total estimated cost, $40,000 here so far for the first 6 or 7 months of the lease here. We spent approximately $5,000. Because we're not going to spend all of the money on the stalls, we're estimating another, $8,000 to be spent over the course of the lease.
So they're using their own money to
Yep.
make improvements. It's not even part of the major improvement exhibit C.
Yeah, so the the indoor ring, building number 8, the old maintenance building, paint is peeling. We're gonna be painting those, reinforcing any of the walls, within the buildings, and certainly maintaining the property, so.
Well, just what you've done to the greenhouse.
Oh, that looks
I know,
amazing.
I took the previous board through there. That greenhouse was in very rough shape. You would not recognize it today if you got through it.
Yeah, you
virtually.
took me through.
Yeah.
Oh,
It comes fully with snakes, yeah.
And everything
Remember the
else.
snakes, yeah.
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 No, thank
And,
you.
and we're very excited because the building does give us the opportunity to have many children, many students in that front room, as we call it, the gathering room. Today we had our first day of spring camp, and it was really great to let them have lunch to work. It gives us area to be able to store our hay and our feed, and it's just really convenient, that center section that was the greenhouse, and then we have the other room for tools and our lounging.
And your kitties.
Yeah, yeah.
And
kitties.
kitties.
Yep.
Right, and then the last page, it's just right directly from the lease.
Right.
The original, lease, just so you could, hopefully, the plan that we put together is understandable. And now is your time to ask questions, and then the board will take this up the next board meeting on the 12th. I think
Yes.
is the
Yeah.
next board meeting.
Yep.
So they're obviously not, we're not approving anything tonight. We're just here asking questions, follow up. And we can also, if we go home and you have more questions, obviously, we can get those questions answered for you.
Thank you. This is really helpful.
You're welcome.
So this exhibit C, part of the lease, does have a provision for minor temporary improvements. Now, under the lease, are those things also eligible for credits against?
No.
They're not.
All the bottom part minor is everything at their expense, which goes with this one here, Jean.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we were just trying to show the other stuff that they were doing without asking for the town to be reimbursed, the additional work that they were
So
doing.
if you follow this, Jean, it goes right along with that bottom
That bottom
section.
one, yeah.
Updated plan for our internal costs.
Okay,
Anything else? Thank you very much, both of you. We
Thank you.
know where you work.
All right.
Volunteer.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, ladies,
All
who
right.
joined us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
And
you very much.
if they have follow-up questions, we will get them to you.
thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next, number 2. Continuation from our last workshop, we were supposed to have homework, which was go home, brainstorm possible code changes about Hamlet overlay and light industrial. You just got this from MRB literally at about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. They're going to do a better job because we had originally asked them to show the different zoning on here. If you remember, but they.
Right,
didn't
that
quite-
doesn't
they-
have-
they
that's
did
not on
get
there,
To that
okay.
yet.
But
So
this is really to show the distances for cannabis, isn't it?
it is, but it's also was to show that outline of the hamlet, which we then asked to then put the different zoning on there so we could decide when we turn this over to the code committee, is this the
So we
size
have
of the
one
hamlet we
more
wanted?
overlay to put in here in terms of the actual
Current zoning. of
current
each
zoning
parcel.
within here.
Right,
Okay,
so yes, it's kind of multi-use. So it's restricted overlay zone Hamlet of Rush,
well,
and-
the restricted overlay zone doesn't exist. It's
Right,
just to
right.
tell us what would be in that boundary.
Right, but this was for us to utilize if we wanted to tonight, to
Right.
have any discussion on
Okay,
who, what, where do we want to come up with the size of the hamlet. We talked about the comprehensive plan, we talked about the code committee, we talked about the town board, so I'll open it up to everybody for number 2, where do you want to start? There's lots of things on number 2 of the agenda.
Mhm.
so. I don't know that I brought my copy with me in terms of how the code looks right now. I think that's,
Well, let me ask this question.
yeah.
We
Pardon
can-
me. Sorry, Amber, I'm interrupting. This is Phyllis.
I'm sorry,
Um,
Phyllis.
But I have a question. You are looking at documents you're not sharing with the public who is viewing you. Are you going to share those?
No. This is a workshop and not available for input.
You need any help? So, the question is. Which part do we want to?
We
start
need to see what you're talking about.
forward?
Please mute that person.
She did. How do you want to move forward on this?
You have an obligation to share with the public that is watching you the documents you're talking about.
Robert? We have no such obligation at a workshop, do we?
Yes, you do. It's a
No, we
public
don't. We
meeting.
have our attorney here. Phyllis, please mute yourself or exit the meeting. Thank you.
No,
So therefore, how do we want to move forward?
Please keep that person muted so we can conduct our town board workshop.
We have Hamlet overlay and light, those were our brainstorming we were supposed to do.
Mhm.
But is it easier to talk about light industrial, limited, that's incorrect, should be limited industrial? Would you rather talk about that
So-
right now?
Limited, I don't think there's any, and correct me, limited industrial in the Hamlet area.
Correct.
There are 2 separate discussion points.
Correct, I get that. But for purposes, if we want to look at, well, if we're gonna prioritize, we know we have to talk about the Hamlet. And we want to talk about limited industrial and commercial. But in the Hamlet, I don't think we have any limited industrial zoning. Okay, so should we save that for another conversation? Do we want, let's put it this way, back up. Do we want to talk about the Hamlet first?
I think we should let's talk about the hamlet first. I think as a board, we could discuss these boundaries
Okay.
and see whether we think they're appropriate or not.
Okay,
And for me, looking at these right now, I think these are a lot better than the original map that we had.
I-
Because before we were all the way down on 251, right? Wasn't the original map we had like all the way down to almost Pinnacle
You
Road
know,
through the
I think
hamlet?
they talked about it, and then, but I think this kind of rough outline, I think, was from the charrette discussion.
mhm.
Yeah, but I thought the original, I thought the last workshop we had, I thought the map was a much larger. Maybe I'm,
I don't think so, no.
no. I guess
No.
you're right. No, I got it right here, so.
It might have looked different because it was a
Maybe,
smaller
yeah, I
map.
don't know why I thought that. Originally, I
maybe-
thought there was a map that went down quite a
Or
bit
maybe from
further.
your comprehensive plan discussion.
Maybe that's what I'm
Maybe
getting
that's
confused with. Yeah, you're probably right.
But Jean did ask MRB and that's where they got
But the
this outline
addresses,
from,
yeah.
from the charrette.
Right,
Yeah.
When you're trying to determine the hamlet,
yeah,
Mhm.
are there specific things that, like, it goes around behind the houses that go up East Henrietta Road?
yeah. Does that make
Why,
sense?
why wouldn't you want to include the houses? I mean, what's the definition of the hamlet? Is it like commercial?
Not really, it's
Sort
kind
of
of like a
denser,
denser.
residential?
Mishmash, okay, it's everything,
Yeah. I
you know,
there
could be a
there
little
was
store,
official
little,
kinda-
retail and
it's
residential
about-
and our municipal buildings, and
Yeah,
it's, the hamlet is more of a concept. Because we're not really a village even,
Yeah, that's.
You know.
That's why we're a hamlet.
right, exactly. Where does it
And-
begin and end?
And I think my recollection from our last workshop is why we decided to do this as our homework. Was because if we had more homes, residential.
Yeah.
And we were allowing different uses. Would we want that to be included in the more quote residential areas versus the more mixed use areas? That I seem to recall bringing that home.
Well, see, this incorporates Nelson Parkway where it didn't. The
What's
other,
that?
it incorporates Nelson Parkway, which the other one didn't. The other map we had.
Oh, you have that?
What's it show?
No, it's the same one.
No, it's,
Yeah,
I don't know,
There's
Dan,
no-
you and I, yeah,
Yeah, I
I-
don't
I
think Nelson Parkway was in the other. Was it?
No,
I think
yeah, it was.
because it has funds and everything in there, well, or,
it
Some
just,
stuff.
it just has, all that has is just the commercial, so that where it has included of our property, our
Yeah.
business is, that's where it's zoned commercial. So it kind of
okay,
followed
okay,
that property
okay.
line, because that's two different properties.
okay,
But Nelson Parkway was, and I think we had talked about maybe taking that out of the hamlet. Why would we? I think that came up at the last meeting, but I still think that. I think that Nelson Parkway should be included in the hamlet personally.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
I have no problem with this layout of the hamlet. I think the cemetery should be involved, and that's kind of the cutoff to the north right now.
yeah,
But to Dan's point, would you want to include more of that residential area, those houses that come across, like on the
Right, and I,
east side,
I
east side of
think
the cemetery?
I like your discussion on Nelson Parkway, because I think if you've got a road and you've got one side of the road included and the other side not, it kind of makes it
awkward,
Mhm.
awkward. It's like
Yeah.
our school districts around here. This is Avon, this is Rush Henrietta,
Yeah.
this is Amelia Falls.
Mhm.
So would it make sense and to get other input of, you'd go all the way up to. Okay, I'm trying to see, is this is right about to there?
So this is,
Bring that line across and come down?
that's what I was thinking. So this is Steve Ho's barn.
which one? I'm
Up,
sorry.
up here?
Yeah,
Oh, way up there,
so just so you have an idea of where
Okay,
we
I
are
know
on
where
the
you-
map.
Yeah,
So Leary School would be up here.
up, way up farther. So would it make sense to just bring this line over and down?
Further
I-
north?
I would almost think you include that.
Yeah.
That
go
would
right
be the
across
last
road.
house there.
Yeah,
Yes. I don't know if you'd have to get tricky though and do
Oh.
this,
and you also have this one
Yeah.
here.
it's our house.
Okay.
this one here.
Yeah, because if we came across, we're cutting that lot in half.
Yes, yeah. I mean, does it have to be a straight line? Why couldn't
No.
you do,
Our boundary line.
why couldn't, if we want to include more houses, why couldn't we take the hamlet all the way up to Larry School to the north? Come down and we're basically is a cemetery property,
Mhm.
hit these residential lots here. And I don't know what it looks like, but I'm assuming that's a pretty straight line going to the north up to Leary School. And then at Leary School, come down on the west side of East Henrietta Road to here,
On the west,
To there?
okay,
to there, and then come back down.
not to the east,
It's all farmland except for one house.
and is that part of the
It's all
Forever
the-
Farm?
That's all
What's
part
that?
of the
Part of the
Genesee Land
for-
Trust, right?
The land
all
trust
is, yes.
property? Yeah,
Yep.
So come down on the west side of West Henrietta Road from Larry School
Mhm.
to where, what number? And put my glasses on.
I
all
don't
the
see
way
enough.
down
Oh,
to,
I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong one. So 5714.
5714.
Mhm.
Would you-
Or you could come all the way down. Why not?
To
5750
5750, yeah,
would make more sense, right?
yep.
Yeah.
And then come down to the yellow line.
Correct. You may have to make a little jog around. So
Oh.
Amber, everyone, so you may have to make a jog because that's a different piece of property.
Mhm. Oh, come
So,
back out to. East
5822 back out
Okay.
to East Henrietta and
Oh.
around. 58 between 5822, come up around and then
Alright, so
5842.
all of this would be in then, or
Yes.
not? This would be in, so the
Yes.
line would
And
come,
then come down, yeah.
yeah, to there.
I don't know, how does everyone feel about including, I mean, it's a pretty good stretch of residential through there, like Dan said.
Yeah, right, well, I was discussing it with my wife. He says, maybe you should have the school in there.
Well, that's, I mean,
Yeah.
would you go up, would you
I
include
would
the
think
school?
I would,
Well, again,
we kind of had thought that.
if we, depending on how the zoning's gonna go though, it potentially change, right? What allowable uses and things like that. You have to remember, the larger you get the hamlet. If you're saying,
Or your encompass.
if, right, if you're saying, that, multi-use, commercial. Is the hamlet all gonna be, so you
Mhm.
just be mindful of if these residential houses now. Are we gonna zone the whole hamlet commercial or multi-use, so. There's lots to discuss, so.
Mhm.
Well,
I
it
kinda
wouldn't
like
be,
plan A, B, and C.
my vision, that those residential areas are still always gonna be residential,
Mhm.
you know?
Could I ask a question? What would the residents gain from being in the hamlet? What's the plus side to it?
You can say you're in the hand,
Nothing.
no one cares really.
Right, so I mean,
I don't, right, I don't see there's a,
until we have it worked out what the rules are gonna be for the
Right.
hamlet, I guess. I think you would, I mean, we would take all this into consideration and then we would have to go look at, see
right.
where the hamlet would fit the best, is in my opinion.
Mhm. Or just come straight across, like we just said, and come down. So I think,
Good.
so we could spend all night on this, so the question is.
Or just go over this,
How,
you mean?
how do we, is this something that we're taking on? Comprehensive plan, I mean, what,
I think this is gonna be the new committee.
this is gonna be the new committee,
Yeah,
let's give them the
Yeah.
directives.
Well, do we want to give them the directive to create the hamlet or just create the
What's
code for
going
the
on
hamlet?
inside, code for what's in.
I,
here.
I think the code and then we come back and
Yeah,
Good
that-
idea, good idea.
that could lead to what.
Where the.
what the
boundary
hamlet
is.
looks like.
and so like you two guys are both been involved with the comprehensive plan. So have there been discussions about the
Hamlet.
Yeah, what the hamlet physically is.
Yes, it,
Kind of like this.
yeah, at the last meeting, there was some discussion on the Hamlet. It
And
actually,
I think it's,
that's not where we were gearing towards, but that's where the meeting kind of stuck for a little bit and we didn't quite get to where we wanted to get with the rest of it.
Yeah.
Um,
have to revisit.
yeah, so there has been some discussion. That's maybe where I was getting confused on where the lines were, because it
Yeah.
went all the way to like Pinnacle Road. I thought, Dan, maybe that's where you and I thought, because Nelson Parkway wasn't included. And we were like, why isn't that included?
Yeah,
That-
it was,
I kind of like the close knit
I kind of like
Yeah.
that. That's kind of, I like that
when
too.
you want to think about it.
Right, but I think, so, in my opinion, I like the way this, aesthetically, the way this looks tight knit in there, I kind of like that. But I think we should probably lean on the code committee a little bit and see where we come up with what are we looking at for a hamlet, and then we can really pin down where we want it.
I like that.
Yeah, I exactly, because most of this that we're discussing now, these boundaries, it's residential.
Right.
So it's not like we're looking at commercial properties in there.
yeah, that's,
Right?
Yes,
that's a problem.
yeah,
That's, we move forward.
All
It's
right.
gonna stay the same, or
Right,
Well, those are residences, they're gonna be there when, you know. It's just like, what can we allow legally in
Yeah.
here?
okay, all right, so,
So I think, again, the code committee and whatever the I really want to follow as much as we can,
right,
the guidelines of the plan. There's a lot of work when.
right, and
Yeah.
like I said, it was talked about, I mean, a lot of stuff was thrown around trying to figure out, well, do they want to be in the hamlet? Yeah, so it went back and forth.
Okay.
Maybe we should ask those people if they even want to be in the hamlet.
So it's not
But-
like you're in a village where you have another level of tax.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
yeah,
You
That's
know,
why-
that would
that's
be
why I
like,
asked
I'm
what-
not
And
going
I'm not.
there. So.
Know where the hell it is.
We
That's
could
why I
ask
asked, what
Jerry.
would even change really for the
Mm-hmm.
like residential in a hamlet, but we don't really know that until we know what the rules would be in the
Right.
hamlet.
Okay,
So,
all right, so, Jerry, do you have any comment? I know you don't have this at home either, so. We're going to move on to the next topic, if that's okay.
That's okay.
All right, so we are gonna put that with the code committee and bring that up again in a minute. Is there anything on limited industrial under our homework that we were going to talk about? Or do you want to hold that off until we get to it at a different point?
I would hold off on that, I
Yeah,
think, because I think that there's going to be more to look at
I
as the
agree,
code committee moves forward.
agree.
So
Okay.
we could sit here and talk about it and it could be completely different very
No,
quickly.
absolutely, and,
So-
and the homework we had was a lot.
Yeah.
So, all right. Number 3, code committee, feedback from subboard possible involvement. Formation, we talked at the town board meeting that we need to give a directive to this code committee, so. I think tonight, my goal is maybe take 10-15 minutes of how we want to formulate what their expectations are and how they will move forward. I know Mr. Limbeck and Mr. Stracker here. But I can ask Scott, and I know you definitely want the microphone over there, gentlemen. The planning board is interested in participating. We learned the zoning board's going to bring it up again at their next meeting. And what is our mission statement? John Limbeck is here as well. That we want to give them the directive to do. Or do we, we want them to come up with a plan? Do we want to give them a plan? What is your ideas? I'll start with you, Dan, down there at the end, Mr. Williver.
We need to. Working rules for the hamlet. The code that's in place right now is. It's not followed,
Right.
it's there, and it's been there since the 70s at least, and it's. Nothing's changed in the hamlet because
Right, and anytime anybody wants to do something, it's, everything's a variance. An exception or something.
Mhm.
And we need it more workable. I agree. We want to work on the 1911 house. If we want to do anything here in the town hall, we're all out of code.
So I think a directive would be. For us to direct the code committee, and I think that they have a pretty good idea of what needs to be done. I don't know how much direction they need from us at this point, but. Obviously take into. Consideration which parts of the code. Are taking the most precedent right now. And start with those, and then we would review them and.
This started, when the town decided to upgrade the codes. We started looking at making the code more agriculturally friendly. And I think the workshops grew out of that.
Yeah.
And we quickly saw at the workshops that you can get really bound up in the details. And we have to look at, if we make a change in one particular section of a code, where are the impacts that ripple through the rest of it? So the thought was if we could get a separate committee that, wasn't encumbered, and I don't want to say encumbered by the open meeting laws, but if we didn't have a quorum from the various boards, we could work at a little bit faster pace, have good input, and then we would be able to come as a committee back to the town board at this workshop and say, here is an outline of whatever code it is. And then the board could look at that, discuss it, here's the old code, here's the proposed new code. Why are we doing this? And then you could look at it, discuss it, set up a, public hearing and your eventual vote. So I think the different boards are aware of, what the issues are. We've got quite a few code sections that need to be overhauled, updated, whatever you want to call it. But let's work on those, with the intent of making it more reflective of either agricultural. People work out of their homes now, that type of thing. So that was the original thought, and I'll pass the mic to Chairman Sprock so he can, give his thoughts as well.
Yeah, thanks. There's no shortage of things in the code that need to be upgraded, but I think it's pretty clear from what you're hearing among yourselves here. And what you're seeing that the high intensity areas ought to be handled in commercial and limited industrial. That's those are three areas which are somewhat related are where we're having this difficulty. Necessarily restricted and potential businesses coming into town. In terms of the committee, John and I have bounced this around a bit, and I think he's right. We keep it to 2 members of the board, of the zoning board. And John, we've talked to Doug. Doug Starson, of course, the CE, code enforcement officer. He has a lot of experience. He's very willing to be involved. I don't think he wants to be a full team member. And we would certainly pick his brain and ask him to look over things doing. In terms of specifics, from the planning board, who would be myself and John Morelli. John Morelli has the advantage also of being, of course, representing the comprehensive plan. So that works out well. We can't add a third if I want to be involved, because I essentially, instead of playing on the internet or playing with my phone, I read the code. So I don't develop quite an extensive background on what the problems are and how we're related. But if it's myself and we want the comprehensive plan involved, the person involved, then it's got to come to the only 2 of us. From the zoning board, they're about a month behind because of the confusion around whether it could or could not participate. I think Oil and Code has established that there's no problem with the zoning board participating. And I think they would generally have good backgrounds to pull into that as well. So that would be the small group that I would.
Conservation also wants to be
Excuse
on
me?
it. Conservation board always.
I personally prefer not to have additional members, but if we did that, I have a choice of either not doing it or going along with it. So, I mean,
Scott, we did reach out to them, all three boards.
I just don't feel they bring a lot of experience of what the issues really are. There's good representatives of general population as anybody else. But I don't see them having good background code. If that's what you want, we'll try it.
Okay,
This John Limbeck has suggested that I lead it. You may call that facilitator. I'm not sure. To be honest, I'm feeling a little bit like the dog at the bus. You know, we're proposing doing this, and now it's really gonna come about. It's a huge amount of potential work. From the limited industrial and commercial side, I have about a 70 slide presentation. All pulled together with unbelievable amounts of pictures, not only from Rush, but from surrounding towns. Of what the issues are and what needs to be fixed and reasonable proposals of what those fixes could be. I've run a lot of those concepts by Inspector Limbeck, and I think he's in general agreement. I've run those by Planning Board, and certainly John Morelli has bounced back in general agreement. So I can see making pretty quick progress on limited industrial and commercial. And I don't think there'd be a lot of controversy there, although, as you know, the devil's always in the details. The hamlet, of course, is the issue, and you recognize if you start bringing in a lot more commercial areas, or I'm sorry, a lot more residential areas into what is now the commercial area that we call the hamlet, you're potentially allowing any of those residences to convert to a business, right? Unless, and certain towns elect to do that. If you drive up East Henrietta Road, up around where Growmore used to be, for example, those were all residences on the east side that have become businesses. Towns certainly decide to do that. But just beware that if you make the hamlet include a lot of what's now totally residential tracts, that gets you into thinking about, you have to do something. Do you have to call them a different district, or if you call them the same district, you have to have some kind of rules that you don't have wholesale conversion of residences into businesses. I think there's other ways to handle home occupations, what we call accessory uses, that need to be done also, but that's a separate issue. So I think that's about all we can say. You know, we're kind of being slowed down by getting the representatives from the zoning board of appeals. They won't discuss that until the 20th. They're meeting on the 20th. I can reach out to the conservation board. They can come back if they discuss their having members.
so if we were going to look at a timeline. And I agree, Scott and John, it's gonna be a lot of additional work than what you already do. What were you envisioning? How often would you meet? Were you giving yourself a time frame?
We talked briefly, at least and myself, about how we would meet, and retirees like myself who may prefer to meet during the day when people like John are at work anyway. I'd rather do that than meet evenings, and if it's all retirees, we can do that. If not, until we know the total makeup, we can't really reach that decision. In terms of how frequently, I think that the group needs to decide that. I would say possibly as much as we could meet with what's going on in between. Like everybody else, summer's coming up, and I have things I do in the summer as well. And I think the team needs to get together and decide that. But again, I think we could come to a reasonable agreement of the proposal. My suggestion will be, if I can provide my presentation to the decided membership when that's decided on commercial and limited industrial. And if we can agree to the general concepts, I can come up with proposed code probably within a couple of weeks, because I've already taken some stabs at doing that. Again, the hamlet's another animal, that a lot more discussion. The problem with the hamlet is it's not just overlaying, say, residential or residential multiple family on top of commercial or on top of restricted business, you've got to talk about other specifics like off-street parking, like setbacks. There may be consultants who even suggest that something like the nitty-gritty hamlet, you would just say there are no setbacks. You know, you would say it has to be reasonable compared to the houses around it or the buildings around it and consistent with the buildings nearby. That's the kind of thing you get into in some of the real downtown areas.
Well,
So, a lot of discussion.
if the zoning board wants to come on board, could we as a board ask you two gentlemen to put that missions, all that together with an outline of how you foresee the different topics? And with the zoning board meeting in 3 weeks, right? 2 weeks from this Thursday. Then if you have your first date set up, you'll have all that background work already kind of put together. What do you, does everyone think?
No, I think that's kind of where we were at on Thursday. We said that if John Scott wanted to kind of get started and zoning would kind of play catch up with them
Right?
Right,
once they decided what they wanted to do.
Mhm.
So I'm all for that.
We can
Yeah.
start it out more, but we
Okay.
really can't start working. it
but
out.
to get started, yeah.
The other nice thing about a timeline for this is because we don't have a quorum for each board, we can divvy this up into sections and we can communicate emails. You know, be working on things a lot quicker and get things, you know, funneled up to the facilitator, get things, you know, built so that we can look at it. And Scott's already developed one format that I saw where we'll take a code, he'll take a code section and he'll mark in red what the changes are and, you know, and in green what the rationale is behind that. And it makes it very easy for somebody to read and look and say, why are we doing this? And I think that'll be helpful to the board, you know, to be able to look at this and take 15 minutes of the workshop and kick it around and go forward.
So what do we need to do from a board standpoint now?
Well, we need 2 names from the conservation board, and then we'll start, you know. I would, one communication going out and saying, okay. You're now part of the code committee, you know, let's pick a date. It sounds like it's gonna work better to meet during the day. You know, we'll pick a day, you know, whether it's once every 2 weeks, whatever that is. You know, I'm here, you know, come in, sit down, pick things around, and then, you know, assign action items to different people, whatnot, and just start getting involved with it.
Julia Letterman from the Conservation Board showed interest in it, but she's still working.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Julia Letterman from,
Julia, okay, so they're already named the 2 people.
yeah, and Pat Kraus said if you need another person, I'll come along, but she wasn't that enthusiastic.
So one representative, Julie, would be sufficient.
She
Julia
showed the
works.
most interest.
Yeah.
But Julia does work full time.
Oh, so that's a problem.
That's the problem.
One other thing I should mention, I mentioned Doug is willing to
Slows
help.
it down.
He said he would
Maybe.
provide an inventory of essentially what exists in the hamlet. Because he wants to do it for fire code purposes anyway. So you recognize it really would be nice to have a listing of building after building, whether it's a simple single family residence. But then you get the more sophisticated ones, like this is a building with apartments above and a business on the first floor, you get something like that. So by having everything that we need to consider, it would be very helpful to make sure we don't leave something important out.
And we've talked earlier. We being Scott and I. This is red.
Okay, well, go steal Valerie's then if it's red.
Oh, it's a battery.
Yeah.
With the die. You know, it's red.
We talked about doing an inventory, and Doug is gonna be doing some of the obviously commercial buildings. And I suggested that, you know, it would be difficult, but I could take an hour a day and just start knocking on doors. You know, hi, I'm John Limbeck. Who are you? What do you do here? Who owns it? Do you own the building? You know, what's actually happening, and compile that inventory of what's in the hamlet as we know it today. So we've got someplace to start, because there could be things happening that we don't know anything about. Goes back to your accessory uses and different things that you want to try to understand about what's happening in your buildings.
One example, I was on some website where you look up the address of something and it brings up a Google map and it has a bunch of businesses in the area. And one came up right here in Hamlet was a bed and breakfast. Now, I don't know that that really exists, but clearly it was on the map. Okay, and so then, when you there are Airbnbs in Rush, not necessarily Hamlet, but you can just Google on that too, Airbnb in Rush, and you'll find some. So my point is that there could be things like that, and if it's going on and it's reasonable, no, maybe there should be B&Bs in the Hamlet, but we just don't want to overlook something.
You can mute it if you want, Scott. There's a little button up on the top. If it goes to gray, then it's muted. If you guys want to keep it over there in case you need to use it again. I don't think Valerie wants to talk. All right, so we have a board meeting a week from Wednesday. Is there anything doable that we want to ask of them before Wednesday?
I was just. When you were talking, I was just thinking, again, depending on how this shakes out. Maybe we want to shrink the size instead of expand. If that means, if you're saying that, well, I mean, I don't know how it's going to work out, but if we're talking about a whole, different code for what's allowable within the confines of a hamlet to be defined. And that means that you could have like a multiple use kind of thing, like right here, close to where we are right now. Like you said, there could be apartments or storefront or something like that. But you mentioned something in your talk just now about, does that mean that any one of these residences could operate a commercial or retail business out of the residential area? And I don't know that we want to do that inadvertently. So does that mean, because like, if I look at this map, I'm just staring, like there's a whole chunk of it that's clearly, from what I'm looking at, residential. Do we need to shrink it? Like if we don't want to make it so that anybody.
Limitations on things.
If you look at Monroe Avenue between, if you look at Monroe Avenue between Allen's Creek Road and Highland Drive, almost every one of those residences along that strip of road is now a business of some sort or another, anywhere from massages to real estate to financial planning to gyms to barber shops. That whole stretch is all former residences that are commercial businesses.
Just like Scott was saying along East Henrietta Road.
Yeah.
All those little houses.
So I'm not totally sure what your goal is around identifying both the hamlet. If there's some greater purpose to saying the hamlet extends out further, includes residential areas, I mean, that may have a purpose. But you might get into the case where you're then creating different zoning districts within what you're calling the hamlet, right? Because they don't think you want all those residential areas, particularly in a cul-de-sac, from turning into residents into businesses. So keep in mind what would happen. Somebody, let's say a lady, because it's a stereotype, wants to do hairdressing, right? It's like, well, I've got room in the basement or a side room in my building, so I live in this residential house, but I'm allowed, I'm now in a mixed use area. So I'm going to apply to the zoning board for having a business in my house. And you come to the zoning board with an application and we look at the zoning and say, yeah, that's an allowed use. You have to meet these conditions, but given that, we wouldn't have a good reason to turn them down, right? Just because it up until now has been a residence.
Well, I want to be very careful about that when we are adjusting zoning potentially in a residential area, because people buy their homes and expect to live in a residential area and keep it residential for the most part. I believe that, that they don't want to be living and then someone's conducting, a retail or commercial business right next door to them that suddenly is permissible when it wasn't, when they moved in and expected to enjoy their homes that way. So I want to be careful.
If you look at our current zoning map, right now, your expanded hamlet that MRB gave us includes sections of R30, R20.
Right.
So it might be beneficial for John Hinman to take this map and show what the existing commercial district is
Yeah.
right now.
That's,
Amber has already,
he said this is the best he could get from me for
So,
tonight.
I mean, I think that would help the committee look at it.
Absolutely.
And if we try to put together the inventory we were talking about, and identify exactly what's there, now you've got a better basis to start your, okay, how do we do this?
Mhm.
right, I would just be cognizant of that and maybe, and if it means truly shrinking this is just a suggested, from another discussion group. That's all. Is this nothing that we've ever defined officially about it thus far? So, if we're talking truly about the whole zone being multiple,
Well,
whatever.
and I think that's the key, that
Yeah.
as we move through this, there are gonna be different options. Option A is the whole hamlet is zoned whatever that one zoning is. Or do you do multiple zoning areas within the confines of the area that we define as a hamlet?
and that's why we have the committee to
Right.
discuss that, but I just want to be very careful
Absolutely.
of changing residential zones.
No.
I think that could be particularly offensive. I don't think we want to do that. You agree?
Yeah.
Oh,
We sold.
okay.
right.
Some of these houses along here now, all commercial. And my grandfather ran a business driveway, wasn't commercial. I think everybody else was.
But the most important thing that will come out of this is that there are written processes, there are written expectations. So if you do buy a property, you know what you can do there. If you currently live there, you know what you can do there. And when they go to the building inspector or the planning board, they have the tools that they need to be able to do what they do versus have all this pre-existing non-conforming stuff that.
Yeah, I would simply add that there's a political aspect to this, and that is the more specific parcels that you change the zoning of in a big way is more potential to upset people, right? Because
Absolutely.
they live there and they're used to what the rules are and what their neighbors can do.
That's my
what
point.
they can do.
Yeah,
You have to acknowledge that you've got some nice single family homes here deep in the hamlet that know they're single family homes and they know it as a commercial zone. But that is what it is, right? They're aware of it. And by the way, they could convert to something with following the processes. But to the extent that you can limit the number of parcels that undergo major changes, the better your life will be.
right.
And the better you'll be able to get this through a public hearing.
I agree.
So
Thank
let
you.
me circle back to, we have a town board meeting a week from Wednesday. Is there anything we want John and Scott to put together for that meeting?
Yes, a kind of an outline where you were gonna start. When, to the extent you can come up with some kind of timeline, I don't want you, everything to be resolved and we get nothing done till you're completely done with everything you want to talk about in the whole town. I think there's some priorities in terms of whatever the hamlet is gonna be. Because there's things that want to happen here. But I do know the urgency. I am aware of the stuff that's going on in our current limited industrial areas and the conflicts going on in those, for those businesses. So, yeah, everything is urgent, so.
And I
Maybe-
think we can work on multiple items simultaneously.
Okay,
I don't see it being as, wait to finish one, start the other.
okay, thank you.
That wouldn't be my intent.
Okay.
Jerry, do you want to add anything? You've been pretty quiet.
I learned long ago that if there's a group and they have common momentum, which it appears you four have, and a couple of the others making contributions tonight, I'm still stuck back on this shouldn't be so complicated. But I understand it is complicated and probably takes complication to get out of it. So I'm trying to learn by listening to what everybody has to say. And you know, when the time is appropriate, I certainly have my opinions on things. And you know, let me just give you an example of what I'm thinking of. We had that charrette. And if you looked at the results of the charrette, people in the hamlet, well, not people necessarily people in the hamlet, but people had an idea that they wanted the hamlet to become something that it never was. It was never the cute little farm village with wooden sidewalks and hitching posts and all that stuff, although people would like to see that today. And the effort to make it that, it just wouldn't be worth it. And I don't know if anyone else has thoughts like this, but that's why I haven't been opening my mouth. I don't know if it's a cough medicine or what, but.
All right, thanks, Jerry. Anything else?
No, I guess I'll let it go at that at this point.
I'm gonna ask again, do we want Scott and John to put something together just as far as your, what's the idea I want to say, your perspective of how this would work?
Honestly, I'm fine with them just getting to work.
Okay,
I that's my opinion.
no, that's why I'm opening it up.
We've already, I think we gave them,
Gave the green light.
let's get it moving, and then
Okay,
maybe in a month, we'll have something to look at.
I think I'm getting the sense they know.
That's kind of, that's kind of where I was at.
I just want
they
them
don't-
to acknowledge what we think.
I think they've acknowledged that. I think they're ready to go, so.
You two are ready to
we'll
go.
just-
Okay. All right, check it off our box. Thank you very much.
So do you make up here on Wednesday?
Yes, that would be great,
Okay.
Robert. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's next Wednesday.
Do we need names, Robert? Or don't we need specific names for the committee? Just say that the committee can go, just,
Yeah, well, I'll look into it.
okay.
Okay.
They should be.
Yeah, I wouldn't see that we would, but if we do, it'd probably be good to make sure, well, we can't, because zoning, that'll screw zoning up, we don't
But
know.
we could say 2 placeholders.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine,
Right.
yeah, okay.
All right, number 4 is commercial code review submitted by Chairman Strock, but I believe that's gonna go into,
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, yep,
check that off our box.
Yes.
yep.
Is that all right, Scott? All right, planning board feedback. There were 2 things that we asked for their feedback, and I'm gonna turn this over to
Okay.
Jean as the liaison to the planning board.
So, first one here is the local law setbacks, and I handed out the map that was and the discussion items that the planning board had recommended, and I don't know if anybody had a chance to think about that in, you know, in terms of changing the setbacks in on certain roads. And what do we want to do with that? Had anybody had a chance to look at that? Oh, you weren't there.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna say.
think there's probably one in your
I've checked.
mailbox. You check your mailbox, it's not there? I gave one to Pam, I'm sorry.
Am I having a dream, or did we get advised not to alter the setbacks?
The planning board's recommendation is to, and I'll let Jean speak to that.
Okay, so basically we had come up with, and we were going to change
Yep.
the setback here from 110 to 100. And then we asked the planning board to take a look at that. So what they did is they did a study of why different roads have different setbacks and the right of ways within those types of roads and the typical widths of those roads.
Yep.
And as a result of that, they are recommending that we don't change it.
Yes, I got all that, but
Oh.
I just didn't see the map.
Ah, okay, all right. I'll give you I think I have an extra.
Well,
If
I
not, I'll-
think for just a little background on this. This came up to us at a workshop when we were talking about ag stuff. I think,
Yeah.
John Limbeck brought it up. I believe that you had,
Came up because of signs and all.
Okay.
Different
Yeah.
things.
Okay.
Depending on setback.
so it came back that, Mark David had informed John Limbeck that the town was in fact allowed to set their own setbacks. It wasn't
Yeah.
according to the state or the county. At that time, it seemed like, just for ease of understanding and to make things flow better, that we would, in the residential districts is what we kind of focused in on at that point, that we would make everything 100 foot. Our town roads were already 100.
Yeah.
And we decided, or we had been discussing, just making everything in R20 and R30 100. And we had a pretty lengthy discussion on it, I think a couple of times at a workshop, well, at least one time. When we got the recommendation from planning board. Yeah, at this point, I think that we've had quite lengthy discussions about it. I don't know what else we could say. I know planning has their reasons for keeping it the way it is.
And in reading it, once we got this and I was able to digest it. I'll just typically the right of way with the state and county roads is 66 feet, approximately centered on the highway. The current town code has the structure setback for residential zoning is 110 from the center line. Therefore, the offset from the property line is 110 minus 33, which is about 77 feet. Town roads like Jeffords, Kavanaugh, Kais, etc. Blah, 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 blah. So the math here says the offset from the property line would be 100 minus 25, which is about 75 foot. So that's about a 2 foot difference. The code was written to address the difference in highway right of way so that the respective setbacks from the property line would virtually be the same distance. Changing state and county road setbacks for residential zones would only have a
It was part of
67 foot
this
offset from the property
I'll
line.
resend it.
Current code for the right of way of town roads dedicated for housing tracts or subdivision is 60 feet.
I'll
The 100 foot
resend it.
setback from road center line for these new town roads would be 100 minus 30, which is 70, blah, blah, blah. Given this information, there does not seem to be a logical basis to change the setback for residential zones from 110 to 100. And in reading that,
The attachment.
I had never thought about what the planning board had put together as far as the justification for it. And I know when we talked about, say, 251 and 15, you know, from center line, 100 feet versus 110 feet would be a significant difference.
A lot of those were in the commercial district though that we were talking about.
Right.
In the commercial district was gonna stay the
Will
same
stay the same,
at
right?
140.
So I understand where the planning board's coming from and my opinion right now, unless someone can. I would agree with the planning board on leaving it at 110 and 100, just because of we are not right of way, we are center of the road. And having that from a state and county is significantly different. I know if you were to go down to some of the little bumpy roads like Stell Road and Gola Road, you know, they're even smaller type of, even though they're town roads. So I understand their justification and that's just mine, but again, I'm open to listening to what everyone else. Again, we're not making any decisions tonight. We're just
Right.
talking about it
Right.
and we will have to make a decision at some point whether to adopt the current local law or not adopt it or make some other change to it.
Well, that had to be the justification for the original, what the original.
Right, and
I'm
that
guessing,
seems
yes.
to be what this is for. And that's the thing that I think we missed as a board, is not getting that outside opinion. It made perfect sense when we were talking about it, the five of us. And then someone throws another,
A logical explanation
Right.
in there.
As to why it is what it is.
so again, this would be something that we would just, is there anyone else want to throw out their thoughts? Dan did, I did, you can come back,
No,
to me, whatever.
I had been comfortable with the change,
Mhm.
but then after reading this, it's like, well, this made logical sense to me, and so I'm leaning towards leaving it the way it is because
Yeah.
there's a reason why those setbacks are the way they are on those roads.
Jerry, anything from you?
I agree with what you just said, Amber, and some of my reasons for that are not aligned with yours, but I think there's a lot of things to consider. One of them is safety. Safety is a big concern to me. You know, people get severely injured over 2 feet. And to even tighten it up more and reduce it to 100, I don't think is well, I just don't think it's a good idea.
All right, so Robert, my question to you, again, we're just at a workshop, we're not making decisions. Is this something we would put on an agenda for a town board meeting to have a further?
So,
discussion?
sorry, I'm too close to the mic.
No. It might be on mute, so.
I think to close the loop is probably the best practice, just to have it at the next board meeting and vote on it. You know, as practical reality, sometimes these laws die if they're just never brought back up and
Yeah.
they just sit. But I think to close the loop is probably best just to put it back on the agenda and have the board vote on it.
Okay, thank you. All right, it is 8:30. We now have the local law accessory apartments and
Yeah, that one, there was, for the most part, no substantive change to the law that we came up with and had a hearing on and everything. And then again, we had neglected to send it out for review. And they had some changes that were more in the wording, like we should change it to allow people who want to move into Rush to be able to have an accessory apartment, not that you already have to live here. You know, so if you were gonna, it's like some fine
when I
wordsmithing.
highlighted it, is that the part? Because I've read it and I
The
ran it by.
purpose section.
Yes,
Is it the,
it says, okay, the purpose section. And I thought you were gonna redline it, Robert, and send it back to us. You probably haven't had a chance
Yes,
yet.
yeah, that we talked about that on Thursday.
With regard, so it is,
120-61
Yeah.
subsection A, right? So if the
Yes.
purpose and intent of accessory apartments to provide one family dwelling property owners the opportunity to maintain and preserve a single family residence and at the same time provide housing needs for relatives of families presently living within the town of Rush or for person the domestic employee of the homeowner. That's the currently existing code, so our changes weren't changing that at all. But the planning board's input was that they thought that section was confusing because it's suggested in their mind that you're only providing housing needs for relatives of families presently living within the town of Rush.
so someone couldn't move here to live with a relative
Oh,
because of the wording.
okay, I guess if you read it that way, I.
Yeah.
presently
yeah.
living, so how
Boy.
could they, I know,
So this is just a purpose section, so
okay,
that's, for instance, even if that had said in, you know, that's not a restriction, right? So
oh.
that's just
okay.
a general, when they adopted the code, the purpose of this section in 2003 was because they likely had people living within the town of Rush who had the idea of, well, we want to put our grandparents in their accessory apartments, or mother-in-law, or whatever. And so that was the purpose of it when they adopted it. But it doesn't hurt to change that. Just as Gene says, not a substantive change. We don't have to go through the public hearing process. If the board also reads it that way and has a concern with that, we can change it. I can change it to say provide housing needs for relatives of families presently living within the town of Rush or living elsewhere, whatever the wording will be. Just to make it clear that it's
Yeah,
not
and
just.
who want to move into to live with a family who already
Yeah.
lives here.
I would say
It's,
if there could be that little,
that's a really easy change. Once I figure
what
out
do
what the
you,
word.
everyone thinks?
So
If we're cleaning up, I might as well.
If you live in the town of Rush, you can have family members from different municipalities.
From outer space.
Yeah.
But they gotta be relatives. They still have to be relatives.
Yes.
All right,
I will make that change, and if that, you're gonna put that on your next.
we'll put that
On
on. the
as
next
well.
agenda.
This is yours. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
so the affidavit,
Yeah.
though, is
I
not,
could not find what you were referring to on the.
the affidavit is more of a town form, rather, it's not a local law, it's a town form. But I will make that change as well.
What was
Okay.
is that similar wording on here, or was that
Yeah.
something different?
So if you go, I have to pull it up.
Okay,
The
you want to see my copy?
I have a copy of it.
You can
You wanna see it, Robert?
Yeah. Thank you. So this is the accessory apartment affidavit that's.
Yep.
That's at, it's at the town clerk has a copy, obviously. I think it's also in the code somewhere, but it's not part of the code, right? So the code references that this affidavit exists, but it's not, again, not a restriction or a code provision. But in that apartment affidavit, number 2 says the accessory apartment shall be occupied by members of the family of the owners of the dwelling or by relatives or domestic employees of said family unit. Specifically, the accessory apartment shall be occupied by blank, comma, blank, list relationship to owner. And so the concern there was, well, what if the owner wants to be in the accessory apartment? So in other words, I think that the change is, we don't want it to say specifically the accessory apartment shall be occupied by blank, comma, blank, list relationship to owner. We want to remove the reference to owner being the second blank, because the first blank is talking about someone who lives in the accessory apartment. So again, not a substantive change, because there's not actually a restriction that the owner can't live in one half, the relative or domestic employee can't live in the other half, but just a clarification. So I can look at that as well.
Well, who said which one's the accessory apartment?
Well, that was sort of my
I wasn't
response
able to
was.
bring it up.
Well, it depends on, what. If the owner's in one half and the relatives in the other half, who cares if you're calling one the accessory apartment and one not? They're both.
You're
part of the
together in the
house.
same
But
house.
it's not a difficult change.
Okay. So we will add those 2 items. Jerry will add his agenda for the next town board meeting. It is 8:38. Do you want to continue on, or are you ready to move these to the next?
What about
workshop?
could we do the special permit application?
I do not have anything.
I have it here. I don't have the original one, but I have this new one that they are proposing.
But we did
and-
not get copies. We don't have it.
Yeah.
It wasn't sent to us.
I didn't. I don't
No?
Remember
We
seeing
did
it
Okay.
not.
either.
I'll send it to you then.
So I would say we could, Jean, but none of us have seen that.
I'll show you right now. It's basically. I'll
You wanna
send it
just-
to you. I'll
want-
send it all to
you
you
just-
along with Scott's explanation, which was very helpful. Thank you. Why it's changed. Nothing, again, nothing substantive changing. It's just more explanatory and adding things like code sections, like what code section are you asking about, kind of thing. And then some comments on general requirements. So it's making it a little bit more comprehensive. Is what this does with all of these extra questions, but I'll send it along with Scott's explanation. Because that helped me figure out like, oh, okay, I get it. I'll do that. And I guess I forgot to do that if you asked me to do it.
It's
before.
okay. Okay, well, we've got more than our share of stuff
Okay.
we have on our tables right now. Then the only other thing on there was the accessory uses, that was kind of part of our homework as well, but again, I will leave it up to everyone. What would you like to do?
I'm good for tonight.
I'm not delighted staying up any longer.
I Councilman Wolliver?
I've had enough.
Okay. I won't take it personally. Councilwoman Morelli?
Yes, let's go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we are gonna add town board meeting, local setbacks, accessory apartments. And we will move things to the next town board meeting. Hopefully I'll have more on this map with more zoning. I will get it to you once I get it from MRB. That will help us tremendously.
Yep.
And thank you to everyone. I will speak for everyone. Thank you, Scott and John, for taking on and keeping at us to get this code committee going. Thank you very much. Jerry, get better. And with no further business to address at tonight, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn for the evening.
All in favor?
I.
Aye.
And thank you for working with the people on the Horseless Friend.
You can cut us off. Good night.